We have women here representing a wide range of different cultures, religions, and upbringings. And we are all at different stages in our journey. Some of you haven't had a relationship partner for over 20 years. Others just started dating someone new. Some are engaged. Some of you on here have been with your partner for years or decades, while others are widowed. And then there are also many of you who are currently separated or recently divorced. Whatever your current situation, I want to welcome you and reassure you that you're not alone. And one last thing before we dive in, I want you to have the freedom to stay in alignment with yourself. Not everything I share will relate to you and your current situation. And not every idea and strategy I provide will be for you. So I want to give you permission to just take what serves you and leave the rest. Or as they say, take the meat and leave the bone. Sound fair? So to start us off, I'm curious to know, how many examples do you have in your life of long-lasting, healthy, romantic relationships? Go ahead and drop that in the chat. Drop a number. So think about it. How many examples do you have in your life of long-lasting, healthy, romantic relationships? All right, so Sarah says 1. Shannon says maybe 2. Marcy says 1, 2. Keep those coming. 1, 2, almost 1. Interesting. Lori, I'm curious what the almost 1 means. 2, 3, 0, 3. A half. Maybe that's a half, or maybe that's one or 2. Okay, so most of us have never seen the kind of marriage or healthy relationship that we hope for ourselves. Meaning that most of us didn't have that modeled for us in our lives, causing us to create our own beliefs and narratives around what a relationship should look like. But what we're exposed to ends up constructing our reality of both ourselves and our relationships. So essentially, the relationships that we have end up being a reflection of the way that we see life. And I'd like to share a quick backstory to help you understand what I mean. Is that okay? Give me a thumbs up or a yes in the chat. Okay. So my parents were both teenagers when I was born. And the guilt and shame that was handed down to them from their parents as a result of that provided the backdrop to the environment in which I was raised. And I know that my parents loved me in the best way that they knew how. But the way that my child mind processed that love was likely different from their intentions. So I grew up believing that love and approval was dependent on my behavior. It had to be earned. Anyone else feel that way? Yeah. Michelle, I see that there's somebody in the waiting room. I'm not sure if you noticed that. And if I could just pause just to make sure that everybody is unmuted. I noticed an echo and I'm not sure exactly where that came from. So
Michelle, I think that might be me.
Whoa, what was that? I'm not sure what that was, but that was a major echo. Okay, I'm gonna let in Leona. Okay. All right, so my dad ended up becoming a youth pastor who lived a double life, cheating on my mom with dozens of women and even getting my mom's best friend pregnant. So I was exposed to a lot of dysfunction. And they ended up getting divorced when I was a freshman in high school. And I remember making a vow to myself that I would never be like them. I would get it right. I would have a loving marriage and I was never going to get divorced. The problem was I had no real vision for what a healthy marriage and family actually looked like. Like so many of you, I had 1 or 2, maybe, in my life, right? So as much as I didn't want to have the same marriage they had, I didn't have exposure to any other way. What we witness growing up is often what we become accustomed to and comfortable with. even if it's unhealthy. So if you grew up in chaos, you'll be attracted to relationships that come with a lot of drama. And nice guys will seem boring. Is that resonating with any of you? I was definitely one of those. I don't want to be with a nice guy because they bore the crap out of me because I was raised in chaos. The experiences that we have in our childhood cause us to form a belief about ourselves and relationships. And for me, it was when I find the right man, then I will be happy and complete. And this narrative ended up shaping my behaviors for the next 3 decades. When I was in a relationship, I felt complete. And the second that relationship ended, I was searching for that fulfillment in the next one. In the year after graduating from college, I gave birth to my first child out of wedlock. I found myself in a physically abusive marriage, and I got divorced, all within 1 year. I remarried a couple years later, and this time I was certain that I had finally gotten it right. We had 3 children and served as youth leaders at our church, but just shy of our 10-year anniversary, I found out that my husband had been living a double life, just like my father was. Interesting how that happens, isn't it? I was devastated. The thought of being alone was unbearable. So even though I was still grieving the loss of my marriage, I started dating before our divorce was even finalized. A few years later, I fell head over heels for my current husband, and we had a whirlwind romance. And I was so blinded by the love and acceptance that I felt from him that I didn't see just how unhealthy and emotionally abusive our relationship was. But the thought of getting divorced for a third time was out of the question. I couldn't bear the shame and embarrassment of that, so I suffered in silence. I've had conversations with many of you that are currently in a similar situation, maybe posting pictures of you and your spouse smiling on social media, going out with friends, attending church together, but behind closed doors, you're living separate lives, maybe even sleeping in separate bedrooms, feeling completely disconnected and alone. And I just want you to know that I see you. I've been there. So just shy of our 5-year anniversary, I remember sitting at the kitchen table as I watched my husband spew the same hurtful, abusive language toward my 19-year-old daughter that he had used on me all those years. I tolerated it when it was happening to me. But as I sat there watching it happen to my daughter, I was able to see it for what it was. And I asked for a separation. He moved out the day after Christmas. I was 43 years old, and I didn't know who I was, what I wanted, or even what made me happy. I had given so much of myself to everyone all those years that I lost myself in the process. I didn't know how to be whole, happy, and complete without being in a relationship. As I faced the possibility of a third divorce, I was forced to admit that I was the common denominator in all of my failed marriages. Even though I could blame it on the abuse, narcissism, or infidelity of my partners, I was starting to realize that there must be something inside of me that was attracting those relationships into my life. So during our separation, I turned my focus on the only thing I had the power to change: myself. I knew that whether my marriage worked or not, I needed to figure out why my relationships were always ending up like this. I went on a journey to discover the beauty and worth of who I really was. And that led me face to face with my unhealed wounds and unmet needs from my past. I developed an understanding, though, of how those wounds and unmet needs had impacted my view of myself, men, and relationships. And I created a new vision for who I wanted to be and the character and values that I wanted to be known for. And my husband not only noticed, but it motivated him to do the same. And after 18 long months, we reconciled and he moved back in. But in the years that followed, I found myself still getting triggered and then shaming myself when my emotions got the best of me and I didn't measure up to the standards that I had placed on myself. Since I had grown up believing that others' love for me was conditional based on my behavior, I struggled to forgive myself and move past the shame and guilt. I just kept trying harder and using shame to motivate me to change. And then one day, I randomly came across an inner child meditation online that completely opened my eyes to a new perspective. There wasn't much to it. Soft music was playing in the background, and a little girl's voice started repeating these 3 phrases over and over. I see you. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I just started weeping. I realized in that moment that I had avoided ever facing that little girl inside of me because I was certain that I had disappointed her by breaking the vow that she made. I thought she would be ashamed of me and that she wouldn't want anything to do with me. But for the first time in my life, I was able to look back with compassion on some of the choices that I made as a teenager, a young adult, and even as a full-grown adult, knowing that I was doing the best I knew how, based on what was taught and what was modeled for me. That experience transformed the relationship that I had with myself, giving me permission to be a flawed human being. And it allowed me to extend that same compassion to my husband, understanding that he came into our relationship just as wounded as I was. And we were both just responding in the only way that we knew how. We now share an intimacy and oneness that I have never experienced before. We are both free to be ourselves, and I feel fully known and fully loved and adored by him. My plan over the next couple days is to share as many tools and resources as I can with you so that you too can create and sustain a safe, healthy relationship with yourself and a partner. Because no matter where you are in your journey, chances are you've been unknowingly operating with an unhealthy belief system that is preventing you from having the life and relationship that you want for yourself. And most of what you struggle with will come back to the relationship that you had with your caregivers. Even if you had amazing parents, they were human and they weren't able to meet all of your needs. So your child brain tried to make sense of the world and protect you from pain by forming a belief system that you may not even be consciously aware of. So if your father wasn't available, for instance, whether he worked long hours, didn't pay you much attention, or was absent altogether, you likely formed a subconscious belief that love isn't available, or that men will eventually abandon you if you don't make them happy. If you had a sibling who needed lots of care and attention, or maybe even who just received a lot of attention because of their accomplishments, you may have developed the belief that you're second best or that you're not a priority. Is this making sense? If you were sent to your room when you were crying, you may have adopted the belief that painful emotions need to be pushed down or that you need to keep your feelings to yourself. If you never saw your parents argue, you may have adopted the belief that all conflict is bad and must be avoided at all costs. On the flip side of that, if you saw constant arguing and fighting in your home, you likely grew up believing that's normal. So you will attract that same tension into your own relationships. No matter where you fall in those beliefs, I'm guessing that you also dreamed about being loved and adored in a relationship. Because no matter what your home life was like, Every fairy tale you heard, every movie you watched, and every song you sang along to programmed you to believe that when you found the one, you too would live happily ever after. But somehow it didn't turn into the fairy tale that you had envisioned. So now you're in a place where you're wanting to learn how to have the relationship that you desire, one where you feel like you can be yourself and where you are adored and cherished, but you just aren't quite sure where to begin. You never had a class in high school or college that taught you how to understand your emotions or what to expect in a relationship or how to even behave in one. No one ever taught you what to do when things went wrong. In fact, if you think about it, no one even taught you how to define what wrong was. The good news is that you're in this room. And whether you're in your 20s or your 70s, I promise you will walk away from this with your eyes open to truths that no one has ever shared with you. It's gonna blow your mind because once you understand it, it changes everything. In fact, your eyes may be opening already to some of the beliefs that you have subconsciously adopted over the years. So I am going to share my screen with you. Let's take a moment to think about what some of those beliefs are. What are some beliefs that you learned about love and life? And as I review these, drop the number in the chat or type out a belief that you had that maybe isn't on this list. Okay. I am complete or whole when I am in a relationship. 2, when I find the one, I will be happy. And mind you, there can be, you can agree with multiple, right? There won't just be one likely. Number 3, love and affection must be earned. Number 4, if I can make them need me, they'll never leave me. 5, love is conditional on my behavior or success. 6, men will eventually abandon me if I don't meet their needs. 7, men always lie, cheat, leave. 8, women are weak, needy, too emotional. 9, relationships never last. 10, conflict must be avoided at all costs. Yeah, someone said it's so powerful to get words to the beliefs. Yeah, because they're on a subconscious level. We don't even realize that we have these beliefs until we hear them and we're like, oh yeah, that is what I think. I do think that women are weak. I do think that men always cheat, right? So I just want to go through the chat and see if there's any. Yeah, so it looks like we've got several different beliefs. No such thing as unconditional love. Everyone will always leave. A new one, physical touch from a parent equals approval. Okay, yeah. So what I'd like to do now is kick this off with breakout rooms where you will share your answer to these questions. Number 1, what beliefs have you adopted as a result of your life experiences? Number 2, in what ways have your relationships reflected how you see life? And number 3, if you have time, what do you hope to get out of this event?